everybody. My name is Jade Turan, and I work for FFKR Architects. I'm also the marketing chair for the NAIOP Utah board here in Utah. And we are doing these weekly videos to help our viewers and our membership deal with some of these unprecedented times in our commercial real estate market. And today I am joined by James Eldredge of the Buckner Company, and he is going to answer a bunch of questions many of you may have about your properties and insurance coverage. James, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about property insurance. It's near and dear to my heart, and specifically business income coverage. I think it's very interesting and pertinent in these times.
All right, well, let's get started. First question right off the bat. Business interruption coverage is an important part of any kind of property coverage. I'm sure business owners are curious if they even have this coverage for this unprecedented time, COVID-19. I mean, what can you tell our business owners about business interruption coverage?
Well, business interruption is certainly a really important part of your property insurance program. But what we need to look at is there going to be coverage due to the COVID-19 virus? And at this point, I would say no, from everything we're finding from claims. And what we're going to do is dive into some of the policy language to show you why. And maybe also that will help show you why you may have coverage in other scenarios. So if we pull up my slide here, we'll show the insuring agreement. Sorry, give me just 1 second. So you can see the business income insuring agreement here says, we will pay for the actual loss of business income you sustain due to the necessary suspension of your operations during the period of restoration. So at this point, we have a necessary suspension of operations in some cases from COVID-19. So you might think there's coverage. But if we read on, it gets a little tricky. So the suspension must be caused by direct physical loss of or damage to property. Now, you've also got to look at the declarations for which the business income limit of insurance is shown. Loss or damage must be caused by or result from a covered cause of loss. So we have to have direct physical loss or damage to property, whether that's building or property from a tenant inside the building. Maybe they have a large manufacturing machinery that they need that gets damaged. But we have to have damage to property, and we have to have it result from a covered cause of loss. So let's move to the next slide and see what else we can find. So we want to decide, does a virus cause physical damage? Now, damage from the court's perspective requires physical harm generally evidenced by changes in the physical characteristics that require repair. The presence of a virus on a surface or in the air does not change physical characteristics of property that require repair. So if there's no property damage, business income coverage would not respond. Now there's another issue here too that I want to look at, which is regards to a kind of deductible, if you will, for this coverage. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. And then actually I'm going to talk about the coverage that could be under pollution. And we know some people were thinking they may find coverage for the virus under pollution. Now this shows an unendorsed policy, which has the pollution exclusion. We're going to go through this really quickly. So business income written on a special form excludes discharge, dispersal, seepage, migration, release, or escape of pollutants unless the discharge, dispersal, seepage, migration, release, or escape itself is caused by any of the specified causes of loss. It's a very small amount of coverages we're not going to go into right now. A pollutant is a solid, liquid, gaseous, or thermal irritant or contaminant, including smoke, vapor, soot, fumes, acids, alkalis, chemicals, and waste. Now, here's another definition of contaminant. A biological contaminant is a contamination of food or environment with microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, or parasites. So we have a virus. virus is considered a contaminant, contaminant is considered a pollutant, pollutants are excluded under the unendorsed ISO policy form. So it would appear at this point, no coverage there as well. So let's take a look at the next slide. So here we're looking more at that deductible I was talking about earlier. So damage to be present and how long, what does it take? A building or property can typically be disinfected in one day. And the information we're seeing from scientists is that, the virus can live in the air for up to 4 hours and can live on a surface for 1 to 3 days, depending on the surface. So even if the owner of the property does nothing to disinfect or clean, it's probably going to go away within 3 days. And most business income policies have a 72-hour deductible or waiting period. So at that point, the damage, quote unquote damage, is gone. Let's move over to the next slide. Now this will pretty much put a stamp on whether or not we can find coverage. And this is the ISO CP 0140. This exclusion was released by ISO in 2006, and it excludes loss due to viruses. Now, ISO has stated the filing that they filed this exclusion because presence of viruses was never an intended covered loss under a pollution exclusion. So they want to make sure that people are not trying to torture the policy or the pollution exclusion and try to find coverage to say this is definitely not something we are intending to cover. So ISO introduced this endorsement with quote, efforts to expand coverage and to create sources of recovery for such losses contrary to policy intent. So again, ISO released this as a mandatory endorsement that goes on every policy to make sure they're not picking up coverage for viruses. So that pretty much lets you know that we have no coverage under several different points for the COVID-19.
Oh, wow. That's very, very interesting. Well, here's a question for you, James. I mean, business interruption coverage. What about for government shutdowns? There are executive orders all over the country, stay-at-home orders. Obviously, there are a lot of businesses right now that aren't allowed to be in business. And I'd say that's a pretty big interruption. Would there be, business interruption coverage, due to these government shutdowns and COVID-19?
That's a great question, Jade. There could be coverage for business income if there's civil authority or government shutdowns. However, it's a little bit more involved. And again, it's going to involve a lot of the same issues under the property for general business income. So if we pull up, I've got a slide on civil authority here. And basically, you've got a lot of the same things here. So civil authority coverage could potentially be there, but you have to have a covered cause of loss, and the business income you sustain would be caused by action of the civil authority that prohibits access to the described premises. So at that point, you say, okay, maybe we've got some coverage there. The access to the area immediately surrounding the damaged property is prohibited as a result of damage. So there needs to be damage to property, not more than 1 mile from the damaged property, and there needs to be the civil authority as a response to dangerous physical conditions resulting from damage, continuation of the covered cause of loss. So basically, if you had a bridge that was out that would not allow you to get there and there's no access to the premises, or power lines that are down, something, a bad fire in a building or another building, it's dangerous for a certain perimeter around, government says no one's getting in or out of here, that sort of thing would be covered. But again, no physical damage with COVID-19, so no coverage. And again, you also have the 72-hour time frame for civil authority as well. So for COVID-19, again, the civil authority business income coverage would not apply.
Okay, I understand. Well, since you're talking about physical property damage, let me ask you this. There are a lot of businesses in Southern California, not quite here in Utah yet, but a lot of businesses in Southern California that are taking measures to protect their property, boarding up windows in the event of possible looting and riots. That would cause physical damage to their property. Would there be any kind of coverage due to that kind of action, riots or looting?
Yes, absolutely. So riot, civil commotion is one of the perils that is covered under a property insurance policy. So if for some reason, there's a riot that breaks out in an area where your business is and there's lots of damage to your property, that would be a covered cause of loss. And you should definitely take steps to mitigate any further losses. So boarding up windows, doors, if you need to put up some kind of a fence perimeter or things, those additional costs are typically covered under the property insurance to help you mitigate further damage. And thank goodness we haven't seen that here yet. And I don't know that we've seen anything in Southern California yet, but hopefully we don't. If something like that were to happen, there would be coverage for that under the property policy.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I haven't seen or heard about any, riots or looting, but I have seen a lot of boarded up businesses in Southern California. So that made national news just this week, I think, just precautionary measures. Um, well, in the light of recent earthquakes, let's talk earthquakes. We had one last night in Idaho that was felt all the way here in Utah. We had one here in Utah just a couple of weeks ago, the day after St. Patrick's Day. So let's talk earthquakes and insurance. Is this something property owners and landlords should be educated about?
Absolutely. Earthquake coverage is important. Whether you're a tenant in a building or you're a building owner. But most property policies do not include earthquake coverage, or if they do, it's very, very limited. You may see $25,000 worth of coverage. So to make sure that you have that coverage, if you'd like to have it, you'll need to get your property policy endorsed, or if the property insurer does not offer the earthquake coverage, you can get a separate earthquake policy. And if you have a larger portfolio of properties, let's say you've got $500 million worth of various buildings you own, you'll probably have to get a separate earthquake coverage policy in most cases. Right now, I will tell you, for those larger capacities, it's harder to get. We're seeing capacity is depleted in the insurance marketplace, and premiums are going up. So it's a little bit more difficult to place the earthquake coverage, but we can get there for you. The other piece, again, with business income is not included on earthquake policies. So you would have to see if you could get that endorsed to your earthquake policy to make sure that you have also loss of income in addition to coverage for the actual damage to property.
Okay, well, that's very, very helpful. James, that's all the questions that I have prepared. Is there anything else you'd like to share just in closing, or how do people get a hold of you if they have more questions?
Sure. No, anybody can reach me. I think we'll provide my contact information, but I'm at the Buckner Company. And I would just encourage any business owner to make sure, no matter what they do, if it's a restaurant, a manufacturer, a distributor, a landlord, tech company, make sure that you have a relationship with your insurance broker and understand what your risks are and what options are available to you to transfer those risks to an insurance company, and you make sure that you know what you've got, and whether it's reviewing property limits, business income, whether or not you need earthquake or flood coverage. If you're building a building, getting a builder's risk policy. There's so many things out there, but just I encourage you to find somebody you like to work with, that you trust, and make sure you have a good working relationship so you can keep that insurance program up to speed with the needs of the business.
Well, great, James. Thank you for taking time out of your morning to educate us about this very important topic. If any of you have any questions for James, of course, we're going to have his contact information. And also, if any of you have any ideas of what you'd like to see in the next weekly video, please email Lindsay, naop@naoputah.org, and let us know what you would like to learn about. So, James, have a great morning, and we'll see all of you viewers hopefully next week.